Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. There's many teachings, especially in the Dzogchen tradition, about dreams. And working with our dreams and just working with our sleep and what happens while we're asleep is a very important part of this kind of practice. And it's something that I usually teach every year or so, getting people started with what's called the practice of the night or dream yoga. One of the first things you learn is that there's different kinds of dreams. And a really useful way to begin working with your dreams from the perspective of this tradition is to learn about Ayurveda and the different doshas and what kinds of dreams are most prevalent depending on what your dosha is or your doshic imbalance might be in a particular moment. So how much you dream, the emotional flavor of your dreams, the clarity of your dreams, the frequency of your dreams, how well you remember or don't remember your dreams are all very heavily governed by your constitution, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and combinations thereof. So that's a really great place to start. And that's part of the Ayurvedic series that I teach. We learn a little bit about that. It would be cool to do a more in-depth thing about Ayurveda and dreams. Once you know what your dosha is and once you know how to feel within yourself day by day what is happening with the 5 elements in your experience, dreams become an important way of diagnosing where you're at. Not so much analyzing the contents in some Freudian way. That's not really as important as recognizing the emotional flavor of your dreams and the sort of qualities of how vivid they are, etc., how well you remember them or not. All of those things are really profoundly diagnostic of your health and state of mind, and they're one of the main ways that when I was a clinician doing Ayurvedic work with people, that I used to be able to understand what their dosha is and where they were at in a particular moment. But you can learn that for yourself. It's not really that hard. I think that's really the first step to working with dreams in a really good way. And then we have all kinds of different dreams. Most of our dreams are just continuations of our karmic realm vision. Not that they're all necessarily recognizable, because some of our dreams, even though they're very much impacted by karma, can be very entertaining. So we get all caught up in them because they're so entertaining, especially if you have a Pitta constitution. Your dreams can be very vivid, very jam-packed with lots of narrative and characters and lots of interesting things happening, and you're having lots of adventures, and you think that that's a really great thing. Well, it is fun, but it doesn't actually mean anything, spiritually speaking. That's really more just fire element expressing itself. And then we have dreams that are considered to be true dreams, where we get direct downloads of wisdom. We meet a teacher, we meet an ancestor, or we just get a message of some sort, or we get an insight that seems to be incontrovertible and very clear. Those dreams we can't manufacture. Those dreams just come unbidden, outside of our control. We can't practice to have true dreams. We can certainly clear up our stagnation and become more receptive, and then maybe we might have more true dreams, but they're really gifts. They're not something we can control. And then there's something called path dreaming. That's sort of what people think of when they think of dream practice, being more lucid in our dreams and being able to make certain kinds of choices in dreams and having more of a waking time awareness in our dreams. That's part of the practice of the night. And then there's the last stage of practice of the night, doesn't involve dreaming at all. A lot of times in our culture, because we like to have control over everything, we think that lucid dreaming is the end of the line or the best thing to be doing. But in Dzogchen, actually, And in Taoist dream practice, the best thing is to be recognizing presence in dreams and just relaxing in that and not having dreams particularly. Those are all things that we talk about when we do dream teachings. It's a really wonderful topic and very rich and also very helpful in terms of our ordinary health and ordinary state of mind and also our spiritual lives and path.
I was surprised that the end of dreaming would be celebrated in a tradition where the show is so celebrated also.
But the show is coming out of something. It's resting in what's producing the show. It's not negating the show. Now I'm mixing traditions in any case. The idea of Jivan Mukti is that you would be liberated in life, and what that means is you would be resting in presence while fully participating in the show. You can't just participate in the show without any ability to rest in presence, to relax in your real nature. Your real nature includes this show, but there's the sense of restfulness. There's something else that I've sometimes referred to as sitting behind this. And I don't want to get too deep into this because these teachings require a lot of context and depth to really make sense. But the practice of just resting in your real nature, this isn't true in Taoism, but in Dzogchen it's called the practice of the clear light. So there's something undifferentiated, like that reservoir of potentiality out of which all of this is arising naturally and spontaneously, is sometimes referred to in Dzogchen as the clear light. I don't like to mention it because then some people manufacture experiences because it sounds so simple. But it's more to do with recognizing the undifferentiated potential of everything and resting in that, in wisdom. But it's not a negation or a transcendence of anything.
I just wanted your take on the role of Lakshmi in this tradition, because I'm praying for my career to change.
The popular understanding of Lakshmi that you pray to her for money and material things and to have success. I don't really have a problem with what anybody prays for. But I do know that as we go along in our perception and opening to what is, what we ask for changes. I'm just going to speak very personally because I think it illustrates something. If I were to pray for money, to have more money, and I got more money, and then I died with a lot of money, to me, that would be an entire waste of a human life. That would be something very, very deeply felt, not a moral or ethical judgment or any judgment on anybody. That's why I'm saying this is just personally me. To amass money or things, or I want a house, or I want so-and-so, I want my children to have some great careers or something like that. If I prayed to Lakshmi and did puja to Lakshmi and fervently asked for those things and they came about, I would feel my life was entirely wasted. That's not like a view from the tradition. It's just giving an example of we can ask for things, but we ask for them dependent on what we see as being most valuable in life. What is most valuable to us? There's nothing wrong with asking. It might stop at a certain point, maybe not in this lifetime. We might stop asking at some point just because we recognize that everything has this innate beneficence. And whatever's happening is what should be happening or is happening. And there's no point in asking for anything other than maybe the capacity to just keep doing practice. But again, these aren't rules. They're not precepts. They're not part of a judgment of anybody or what anybody asks for. I'm just talking about a natural development that happens as we recognize more what's happening here about what we might ask for. In terms of Lakshmi, if we're looking at her a certain way, which is certainly a very common way in India and around the world, we're looking at her as the deity that we would ask that for. She's the Shakti, the consort is Vishnu, the principle of maintenance. So she's the active part of the principle of maintenance. And that's how people think of maintenance, like an allowance. I'm going to ask for a bigger allowance, something like that. But there's a wonderful painting by this famous Indian painter whose name I don't remember, but he painted in the 1800s. And Lakshmi is on her lotus, and she has her hands out. And instead of coins falling out of her hands, it's like the whole world is coming out of her hands. So the ultimate in maintenance, the ultimate in the Shakti, or the active principle of maintenance, is that we have a world. The world is the ultimate allowance. We have these bodies, we have these appearings of worlds to live in that are very interesting and fun in a sense, except when they're not, but they're engaging even when they're not fun. So the ultimate generosity and the ultimate principle of maintenance is that there's something to experience rather than nothing. And when we are contacting the more capacious, meaning the biggest sense of Lakshmi, she is the principle of generosity. Because the ultimate generosity that God shows us is that there are worlds instead of no worlds, that there are other beings in our bodies instead of nothing. This is the ultimate generosity. And the image that I first had of this generosity, which could be associated with Lakshmi, is of this fountain, this never-ending fountain of creation. This is maintenance. Lakshmi is the principle of that continuing, the never-endingness of this flow of worlding and beinging. So from my perspective, praying to her for money or career stuff is fine. It's totally fine. But as my Taoist friend Ming wrote in his translation of the Joey, the reward for a life well lived is the ability to give generously. Then we become Lakshmi. Instead of being the beggars at the door, we become the Lakshmi principle. I think it's such a beautiful sentiment that this is the reward for a life well lived, is giving, not getting. And Lakshmi represents this to me. I'm sharing my personal connections and thoughts about Lakshmi. I've never read this anywhere in any Trikitaka or anything. This is my personal insights about her. I've never seen Lakshmi spoken about in any Trika text that I've read or any Trika teachings I've had. Doesn't mean that she's never represented there, but certainly the 5 functions of reality, creation, maintenance, destruction, withdrawal, and emission, are mentioned all over the place. But I've never seen those functions associated with any iteration of Lakshmi. They're either associated with Shiva or Para or Bhairavi or something like that. I don't really know because it's a big tradition and there's a lot of things that are lost and that I haven't read, and she could be there, but I'm not sure. Doesn't mean you can't have her there on your altar. If you connect to it, that's fine. So I guess what I'm saying is it's fine to ask for those things. Just go right ahead. Don't feel shy about it, but also try to have the understanding what it is that she actually represents in this larger sense. And also, Ma said, the ultimate orientation toward life is come what may. That when we're really surrendered, it's like come what may. It doesn't mean that we don't make powerful moves to participate. Come what may is not a doormat position. Doesn't indicate passivity, because come what may is things are coming. We have to interact with them and we have to respond to them and we have to adapt to them and we have to be creative with what's coming. We're improvising with what's coming. Basically, she was like, God is bringing it on. That's our attitude toward everything, ultimately.
I've noticed sometimes I double think that in both directions, like thinking about some options and I'll be like, oh, am I just rationalizing being passive to say come what may, or am I rationalizing being impulsive to say come what may?
I'll tell you a little story about many, many years ago, before I started practicing at all, and through the first years that I was practicing, I used to write about everything in my head. So as everything was happening, I was writing and forming sentences that I enjoyed about everything that was happening. And it was this barrier between me and everything, but it was enjoyable. And it was so ingrained as such a habit pattern, I really didn't know how the heck I was ever going to get out of it. I really doubted that would ever stop. After some years of practice, it just stopped on its own. I did nothing to make it stop other than practice. And I think that's the same with you and other people who pre-think everything that they do or don't do. I think this is extremely common. Eventually, that energy dies down, and one day you're going to wake up and you're not going to be doing that anymore. I don't know how long it's going to take, but you are doing a good amount of practice. Hopefully, it won't take you more than it took me, just a few years, or at least you'll notice that it lessens and that you're being more spontaneous. So the opposite of what you're experiencing and what other people experience also in the same genre is not to act in a different way. The opposite is to act spontaneously without premeditation. The thing about habit patterns is they have a lot of momentum. Often it's hard to pause. They're already going by the time we even recognize what's happening. But if you happen to notice an impulse, like something in you is just going to respond to something, and you can just let it happen rather than thinking about it, you could play a little bit with it that way. But I think ultimately it's going to be the force of daily practice that's going to make this go away. Unrelatedly, nothing to do with you, I wanted to post something on Facebook that just says, we have to stop wanting to be important, or we have to stop trying to be important. Such an energy sink. And you're putting way too much importance to what you do or you don't do. Really, what difference does it make? None of us is really all that important, and what we do isn't really all that important. And of course, our Abrahamic traditions and also Buddhist traditions, pretty much the same, tell us that our activities are very, very important. And this is just false. It's not true. What's important is that we have a more open heart and just act spontaneously from that. Why is that important? Because it's not important. It's just the most fun way to be. That's all. We can't know what the right thing is to do. We can only guess. The actual right thing to do comes spontaneously through openness to wisdom. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jayakula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.